Alright, so, hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila reporting from Dallas County, and I'm here with, who am I here with?
Hey, it's Hanu.
Hello, how are you today?
Good, good.
Alright, do you know what we're going to be talking about today?
We are going to be... Actually, no, I do not.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Codex Sinaiticus, which is also called the Sinai Bible, which is a 4th century Christian manuscript of a Greek Bible containing the majority of the Greek Old Testament and the Greek New Testament written in the uncial letters on parchment, and is actually considered to be the first ever Bible ever written. So, what do you think about that?
Interesting.
I don't know
how...
how...
what
Yeah?
things could be going on with such things.
Yes. I don't know how big you are in Bible and biblical stuff. Have you read it?
I might have read a little bit here and there.
Alright. Well, let's talk about it. So, first things first, the manuscript is actually a codex, which is actually a forerunner to the modern book. And is made of vellum parchment, originally in double sheets. Now, which may have measured about 40 by 70 centimeters. Now, the whole codex consists of quires of 8 leaves, which is a format that came to be popular throughout the Middle Ages. Now, this being 8 parchment pages laid on top of each other and folded in half to make a full block or a folio. Now, several of these were then stitched together to create a book. Now, the folios were made primarily from calf skins, secondarily from sheep skins. Tischendorf thought the parchment had been made from antelope skins, but modern microscopic examination is shown otherwise. Now, most of the quires or signatures contain 4 sheets, save 2 containing 5. Now, it is estimated that the hides of about 360 animals were employed for making the folios of this codex. Each line of the text has some 12 to 14 Greek uncial letters arranged in 4 columns. 48 lines per column with carefully chosen line breaks and slightly ragged right edges. Now, when opened, the 8 columns thus presented the reader to have much of the same appearance as the succession of columns in a papyrus roll. The poetical books of the Old Testament were written stichometrically, which means like writing each new poetic phrase on a new line in only 2 columns per page. Now, the Codex has almost 4 million uncial letters. Each rectangular page has the portions 1.1 to 1, while the block of text has the reciprocal portions of 0.91 as a double space of craftsmanship. Now, the cost of the materials, copying time required for the scribes, and binding established to have equaled the lifetime wages of one individual at a time. So that's basically what the book is and what it's made out of. So, yeah, it's a pretty old book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was it written in, like, it written in Greek or written in Latin?
It was written in Greek.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was written in ancient Greek. So throughout the New Testament portion, the words were written called scriptio continua, words without any spaces between them, which is what that means, in the handwriting style that came to be called biblical uncial, or biblical majuscule. Now, the parchment was ruled with a sharp point to prepare for writing lines. The letters were written along with these lines with neither breathings nor polytonic accents, which are like markings utilized to indicate changes of pitch or emphasis. Now, a variety of types of punctuation are used, like high and middle points, colon, diaresis, on initial iota and upsilon. Now, few liturgies were used along with the paragraphos, like the initial letter into margins, and a plain iota is replaced by the epsilon iota diphthong. Diphthong, almost regularly, commonly through imprecisely known as eticism. So yeah, that's what's going on. Pretty cool. Now, a portion of the Codex held by the British Library consists of 346.5 folios, which total up to 694 pages, each 38.1 centimeters by 34.5 centimeters, consisting over half of the original work. Of these folios, 199 belong to the Old Testament, including the Apocrypha, and 147.5 belong to the New Testament, along with other books, like the Epistle of Barnabas and part of the Shepherd of Hermas, which are both not officially part of the Bible today. Now, the apocryphal books present in the surviving part of the Septuagint are 2 Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the 1st and 4th book of Maccabees, Wisdom, and Sirach. Now, the books of the New Testament are arranged in this order. We got the 4 Gospels, the Epistles of Paul, the Acts of the Apostles, the General Epistles, and then the Book of Revelations. Now, the fact that some of these books in the Codex were preserved in such good conditions, while others in very poor conditions, suggests that they were separated and stored in several places. Now, while large portions of the Old Testament are missing, it is assumed that the Codex originally contained the whole of both Testaments. About half of the Greek Old Testament survived, along with the complete New Testament and the entire deuterocanonical books, the Apostle of Barnabas, and portions of the Shepherd of Hermas. So what are we thinking?
Very interesting that things are missing to, in some way, complete a story where things are missing. Unless they were the boring parts of, the 33 years that Jesus grew up, or, what happened after the Great Flood. How did they manage after they got started?
What did happen after the Great Flood?
Yeah.
What do you think happened after the Great Flood?
Well, it doesn't say how long after the Great Flood that they had to wait for the waters to recede. It just goes into the waters receded and then life began again.
Mm-hmm.
With the rainbow, of course.
Well, the rainbow was supposed to be a covenant between man and God, saying that God will not destroy the world through a flood again, like he wouldn't do that again.
Water again.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why everything is going to go up in flames.
Okay. So, little is actually known about the manuscript's early history. Now, according to Hort, it was written in the West, probably in Rome. Now, as suggested by the fact that the chapter division of the Acts of the Apostles common to the Sinaiticus and the Vaticanus occurs in no other Greek manuscript, but it is found in several manuscripts in the Latin Vulgate. Now, Robinson countered this argument, suggesting that the system of chapter divisions was introduced into the Vulgate by Jerome himself. Jerome being Saint Jerome of Stridon, as a result of his studies in Caesarea. Now, according to Kenyon, the forms of the letters are Egyptian, and they were found in the Egyptian papyri of an earlier date. Now, Gardthausen, Ropes, Angelico thought it was written in Egypt. Harris believed that the manuscript came from the library of Pamphilus in Caesarea, Palestine. Streeter, Skeet, and Mine also believed that it was produced in Caesarea. So, what do you think it came from?
I don't know.
You don't know?
It could come from almost anything.
Let's find out. A lot of people are saying it's coming from Caesarea in Palestine.
Interesting.
Okay. So the Codex has been dated paleographically to the mid-4th century, and it could not have been written before 325 because it contains the Eusebian canons, which is terminus post quem, which is like, the terminus ante quem is less certain, but according to Milne and Skeet, it is most likely to be much later than about 360. So Tischendorf theorized that the Codex Sinaiticus has one of 50 copies of the Bible commissioned by Eusebius by the Roman Emperor Constantine after his conversion to Christianity. Now, his hypothesis was supported... What? What?
Sorry, it was just, you said Constantine. I'm pretty sure he got killed.
About who got killed? Constantine?
Over this.
How did Constantine get killed?
Got killed over this.
Okay. So,
if I remember history correctly, he was killed because he tried to convert people to Christianity, or from the original.
From Greek paganism.
Yep.
I think he died from a sickness. I think he was sick. I think that's how he died.
Poisoned, probably.
Okay. So, so this was supported by Pierre Baltafol. Now, Gregory and Ski believed that it was already in production when Constantine placed his order, but had to be suspended in order to accommodate different page dimensions. Now, Frederick G. Kenyon argued there is the least sign of either of them ever having been at Constantinople. The fact that Sinaiticus was collated with the manuscript of Pamphilus so late as the 6th century seems to show that it was not originally written in Caesarea. So, there's that. So, Tischendorf believed 4 separate scribes copied the work, which he then later named A, B, C, and D. And 5 correctors amended portions who he designated as lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase c, lowercase d, and lowercase e. He positioned one of the correctors as contemporaneous with the original scribes, and the others worked during the 6th and 7th centuries. Now, after Milne and Skeet's reinvestigation, it is now agreed Tischendorf was incorrect, and that scribe number C never existed. So, there's that. Now, according to Tischendorf, scribe C wrote the poetic books of the Old Testament. These were written in a different format in the rest of the manuscript, and they appear in 2 columns. The rest of the book is in like 4 columns, written stichromatically. Tischendorf probably interpreted the different formatting and indicating the existence of another scribe. Now, the 3 remaining scribes are still identified by the letters Tischendorf gave them, A, B, and D, and they were in fact more correctors than with the last 7, which were then labeled as lowercase ca, cb, cc, and e. So modern analysis identifies only 3 of the scribes. So let's see. So scribe A wrote most of the historical and poetical books of the Old Testament, almost the whole of the New Testament and the Epistle of Barnabas. And scribe B was responsible for the prophets and for the shepherd of Hermas. And scribe D wrote the whole of the book of Tobit and Judith, and the first half of the 4th book of Maccabees, and the first 2/3 of the book of Psalms, and the first 5 verses of the book of Revelation. So, what do we think about that?
Interesting.
How is it interesting?
I think that's a little interesting. just thinking of who wrote which books, and it's not necessarily in that, it wasn't written in that particular order.
Oh, yeah. So, Scribe B was actually a very bad speller, and Scribe A was not much better. Now, the best scribe was Scribe D. Now, Metzger states, Scribe A made some unusually serious mistakes. Scribe A and B use nomina sacra when contracted forms most often. Whereas Scribe D mostly use uncontracted forms. So Scribe D distinguished between the sacral and non-sacral uses of, I don't know, something in Greek. I can't read that. So his spelling errors are the substitution for L and I, as for I for L, in medical positions, both equally common. Otherwise, substitutions of I and the initial EI is unknown, and the final EI is only replaced with the word. It's something in Greek also. Now, the confusion of E and AI are very rare.
Greek right now.
Huh?
I said, you and your Greek.
Yep. Are very rare. In the Book of Psalms, this scribe was A-Y-E-I instead of A-Y-I 35 times, while Scribe A normally uses an abbreviated form. Scribe A made the most phonetic errors, like the confusion of E and AI occurs in all contexts. Now, Milne and Ski characterize Scribe B as careless and illiterate. Now, the work of the original scribe designated by the siglum, I don't know how to pronounce this. It's something in Aramaic. And the paleographical study at the British Museum. In 1938, found that the text had undergone several corrections. Now, the first correction was done by several scribes before the manuscript left the scriptorium. Readings which they introduced were designated by the siglum as the Aramaic number. Now, Milne and Skeet have observed the superscription to the first book of Maccabees as made by Scribe D, while the text was written by Scribe A. Scribe D corrects his own work and that of Scribe A, but Scribe A limits himself to correcting his own work. But in the 6th or 7th century, many alterations were made. According to a colophon at the end of the book of Esdras and Esther, the source of these alterations was very ancient manuscript that had been corrected by the hand of the holy martyr Pamphilus. If this is so, material beginning with the first book of Samuel to the end of Esther is Origen's copy of the Hexapla. From this colophon, the corrections are concluded to be made in Caesarea Maritima for the 6th and 7th centuries, and the pervasive ioticism, especially of the diphthong, remains uncorrected. So, what do we feel about these, like Scribe A and Scribe B, being very bad at their job?
To be honest, depending on, I can't remember what century you said this, they were only taught by specific things. Becoming a scribe was you got apprenticed and sold into that type of job. So, depending on who was teaching you, they literally learned what they knew from whoever taught them how to write, so they could scribe it down. So, it's a possibility they didn't even realize that they were misspelling words. So it means either their teachers were already misspelling words and taught them the same thing, or teacher D taught them the proper way to spell words. And so that's why it looks like it's better written.
Okay, so you think it's the teacher's fault?
Well, if we were still in the century where you had to be an apprentice to someone for your job, you learned from whoever your master was, or mistress in some cases, and that's where you learned all your things. Whatever they knew, that's what they taught you, because they were taught that same way.
Yeah, this was in the 6th or 7th century.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So let's actually fast forward to 1761. What's going on?
Sorry.
Okay. So let's fast forward to 1761 by the Italian traveler Vitaliano Dottani when he visited St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai in Egypt. Now his diary was published in 1879, in which was written. So this is what it said, translated from Italian. So in this monastery, I find that a great number of parchment codexes. Some of these which seem to be written before the 7th century, and especially a Bible made of beautiful vellum, very large, thin, and square parchments written in around and very beautiful letters. Moreover, there are also in the church a Greek Evangelische, just in gold and round letters. It should be very old. So, the Bible on beautiful vellum may be the Codex Sinaiticus, which we've been talking about this whole time, and the gold Evangelistrium is likely to be the Lectionary 300 on the Gregory Alan list, which is a Greek manuscript of the New Testament written on parchment. Now, the German biblical scholar Constantine von Tischendorf wrote about his visit to the monastery in Rise in den Orient, or Travels in the East, in 1847, without mentioning the manuscript. Later in 1860, in his writings about the Sinaiticus discovery, Tischendorf wrote a narrative about the monastery, and the manuscript spanned from 1844 to 1859. He wrote in that 1844, during his first visit to the St. Catherine's Monastery, he saw some leaves of parchment in a wastebasket. They were rubbish, which was to be destroyed by burning it in the ovens of the monastery, which is what he said on page 313 of his book. Although this is identified as coming from the manuscript of the Septuagint. He asked if he might keep them, but at this point, the attitude of the monks changed. They realized how valuable these old leaves were, and Tischendorf was permitted to take only 1/3 of the whole, which means only 43 leaves. Now, these leaves contain portions of the first book of Chronicles, Jeremiah, Nehemiah, and Esther. After his return, they were deposited in the Leipzig University Library, where they remain to this day. In 1846, Tischendorf published their contents, naming them the Codex Frederico Augustinus, in honor of Frederick Augustus, and keeping the secret of the source of the leaves. Other portions of the same codex remained in the monastery, containing all of the book of Isaiah and 1 and 4 Maccabees. So, what are we thinking? What do we think about the discovery of the Sinai Bible in both 1761 and then later in 1847?
I think it's kind of interesting that there's the possibility the chapters that we read are just the 15th, is only the third of what we got.
Okay. So what do you think about like the monks being super like very defensive when Tischendorf asked if he could like take the codex with him to Germany?
No, I mean, depending on the time frame that this happened, I mean, that was their hard work. And even though it gets destroyed, they don't necessarily want other people seeing what's happening to it, or copying what they already did and publishing it, even though it's not supposed to be published under anything but what they have.
Yeah, but I think this happened in like the 1860s. So like a long time has happened since the book was written in like the 6th century.
True. But it still doesn't stop what you can change when you don't know a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to 1845. The Archimandrite Porphyrius Opensky, at that time the head of the Russian ecclesiastical mission in Jerusalem and subsequently the Bishop of Chigirin, visited the monastery and the Codex was shown to him together with leaves which Tischendorf had not seen. In 1846, Captain C.K. MacDonald visited Mount Sinai, saw the Codex, bought 2 codices, which were like Codex 495 and minuscule 496, from the monastery. Now, in 1853, Tischendorf visited St. Catherine's Monastery to get the remaining 86 folios, but without success. Returning in 1859, this time under the patronage of Tsar Alexander II of Russia, he was shown the Codex Sinaiticus, and he was later claimed to have found it disregarded in a rubbish bin. So, what do you think about that?
That's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
Is it worth it though?
Worth throwing it in the trash? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, though the story might have been a fabrication, or the manuscripts in question may have been unrelated to the Codex Sinaiticus. So that's also another thing, and might just not have been straight up not true. So I know that Reverend J. Sylvester Davies in 1863 quoted a monk of Sinai who stated that according to the librarian of the monastery, the whole of the Codex Sinaiticus had been in the library for many years and was marked in the ancient catalogs. Now, it is not likely that the manuscript known in the library catalog would have just been jettisoned into the rubbish basket. And it has been noted that the leaves were in suspiciously good condition for something found in the trash. So, probably wasn't true.
Probably wasn't.
Yeah. So Tischendorf had been sent to the search for the manuscripts by Russia's Tsar Alexander II, who was convinced that there were still manuscripts to be found at the Sinai Monastery. The text of this part of the Codex was published by Tischendorf in 1862. Now, which is called the Bibliorum Codex Sinaiticus Petropolaris. Now, this work had been digested in full, and 4 volumes may be consulted online. So you can see all of them online. So the complete publication of the Codex was made by Kersop Lake in 1911 for the New Testament, and then again 11 years later in 1922 for the Old Testament. Now, it was a full-size black and white facsimile of the manuscript, made from negatives taken from St. Petersburg by his wife and him in the summer of 1908, which is what Kersop Lake said. Now, the story of how Tischendorf found the manuscript, which contained most of the Old Testament and all the New Testament, was all the interest of a romance. So Tischendorf reached the monastery on January 31st, but his inquiries appeared to be fruitless. On February 4th, he had resolved to return home without having gained his object. So the following is from a chapter, an extract from the Constantine, from like Tischendorf's book called "When Were Our Gospels Written?" So this is a segment from that. It is on there. So On the afternoon of this day, I was taking a walk with the steward of the convent in the neighborhood, and as we returned towards sunset, he begged me to take some refreshment with him in his cell. Scarcely had he entered the room when resuming our former subject of conversation, and he said, "And I too have read the Septuagint, i.e., the copy of the Greek translation made by the 70." And also saying, he took down from the corner of the room a bulky kind of volume wrapped up in a red cloth and laid it before me. I unrolled the cover and discovered to my great surprise it was not only those very fragments which 15 years before I had taken out of the basket, but also other parts of the Old Testament, the New Testament complete, and in addition, the Epistle of Barnabas and part of the Shepherd of Hermas. So, that's how we got it. So, what do you think? Do you think that's true?
I mean, that would be interesting, but why would someone collect such pieces and then give them to someone else?
That is, yep, very suspicious. Very suspicious indeed. So, after some negotiations, he obtained possession of this precious fragment. Now, James Bentley gives an account of how this came out, prefacing it with the comment, "Tischendorf therefore now embarked with the remarkable piece of duplicity in which was to occupy him for the next decade, which involved a careful suppression of facts and the systematic denigration of the monks at Mount Sinai." So, Bentley doesn't seem to really trust Tischendorf in his recounting. So he then conveyed it to the Tsar Alexander II, who appreciated its importance and had it published as nearly as possible in facsimile, so as to exhibit correctly the ancient handwriting. In 1869, the Tsar sent the monastery 7,000 ruples, and the monastery of Mount Tabor 2,000 ruples by way of compensation. So, good job. So the document in Russian formalizing this was published in 2007 in Russia and has since been translated. Now, regarding Tischendorf's role in the transfer to St. Petersburg, there were several views. The Codex is clearly regarded by the monastery as having been stolen. This view is hotly contested by several scholars in Europe, and this is what Corsup Lake wrote. This is taken from his book. Those who have had much to do with with Oriental monks will understand how improbable it is that the terms of the arrangement, however were ever known to any except a view of the leaders. So, in a more neutral spirit, the New Testament scholar Bruce Metzler wrote the following: certain aspects of the negotiations leading to the transfer of the Codex to the Tsar's possession are open to interpretation that reflects adversely on Tischendorf's candor and good faith with the monks at Mount Catherine's monastery. For an account intended to exculpate him of blame, see Ernhard Lusch's article, Nisches gegen Tischendorf, in his book, for an account that includes a hitherto unknown receipt given by Tischendorf to the authorities at the monastery promising to return the manuscript from St. Petersburg to the Holy Confraternity of Sinai at the earliest request. So, what do we think about all that?
Well, it's definitely something kind of new that came out.
Mm-hmm. So what do we?
You haven't seen it in a while.
Mm-hmm. So what do we think about Tischendorf? What do you think about him?
I don't know. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing.
Do you think it's more of a bad thing?
I'm leaning towards that.
Okay. So let's go to September 13th, 1862. The Constantine Samanides were skilled in calligraphy and with controversial background with manuscripts, made the claim in print in the Manchester Guardian that he had written the Codex himself as a 19-year-old boy in 1839 in the Panteleimos Monastery at Athos. So, Constantine van Tischendorf, who worked with numerous Bible manuscripts, was known as somewhat flamboyant and had ambitiously sought money from several royal families for his ventures, who had indeed funded his trips. Now, Simonides had a somewhat obscure history, as he claimed that he was in Mount Athos in the years preceding Tischendorf's contact, making the claim at least plausible. Simonides also claimed that his father had died and the invitation to Mount Athos came from his uncle, who was a monk there, but subsequent letters to his father were found among his possessions at his death. Simonides claimed the false nature of the document in the Manchester Guardian in exchange of letters among scholars and others at the time. Henry Bradshaw, who was a British librarian known to both men, defended the Tischendorf find of the Codex Sinaiticus, casting aside the accusations of Simonides. Since Bradshaw was a social hub among many diverse scholars of the day, his aiding of Tischendorf was given much weight, and Simonides died shortly after, and the issue lay dormant for many years. So, what do you think? Did the Simonides character actually write the entire Sinai Bible, and it was all just a hoax?
That's a possibility. Or not. I mean, if you can translate it, maybe.
I don't know. It really doesn't make any sense that he did it when he was 19. I don't think you can do that when you're 19. I don't care how much of a prodigy you are. Also, how did he manage to get the papers and the manuscripts all to look like it came from the 7th century?
Oh, aging paper is actually really easy. It just takes keys.
Keys?
Keys.
Keys?
Yeah, a nice brown, not green tea, maybe a chai. Depending on how weathered you want to do it, a chai, maybe a green tea will darken it just well, or a black tea. Black tea is actually the best.
You think that's what he did, if he did it?
I mean, black tea, dip it in black tea, sit it outside, let it dry, do several sheets like that, put it on a shelf, let it collect a little bit of dust, wrinkles. I mean, artists do many things to get a nice picture of an old style book.
Mm-hmm. So there you have it. That's how you could have faked it. But I don't know if you were able to write the entire Bible, but because that's a big book.
Well, I mean, as you said, the lines of the initial Bible, there was no breaks. It was all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those trying to find the breaks, or just do it in that same thing. Is writing it word for word with no spacing.
Okay. So let's see what this Allgemeine Zeitung was said. So in answer to Simonides in the Allgemeine Zeitung, which is it's a daily journal, it's a political journal. So Tischendorf noted that only in the New Testament that there were any differences between it and all other manuscripts. Henry Bradshaw, a bibliographer, combated the claims of Constantine Simonides in a letter to the Manchester Guardian. Now, Bradshaw argued that the Codex Sinaiticus brought by Tischendorf from the Greek monastery of Mount Sinai was not a modern forgery or written by Simonides. The controversy seems to regard the misplaced use of the word fraud or forgery, since it may have been a repaired text. A copy of the Septuagint, based upon the Origen's Hexaspia, which is a text which has been rejected for centuries because of the lineage from Eusebius, who introduced Arian doctrine into the courts of Constantine I and the Constantine II. Now, not every scholar and church minister was delighted about the Codex find. Now, Borgen, a supporter of the Textus Receptus, suggested that the Codex Sinaiticus, as well as the Codexes Vaticanus and the Codex Base, were the most corrupt documents extant. Each of these three codexes clearly exhibits a fabricated text as a result of obituary and reckless recension. Now, the most weighty of these two codexes he likens to the two false witnesses of Matthew 26:60. However, independent discoveries of other fragments of the Codex in recent history prove its authenticity and disprove all theories of it being a forgery. So this is 100% a true document. It is not a forgery.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these new recent discoveries that prove that it's proved its authenticity, which started in like the early 20th century by one Vladimir Boneshevich, who discovered parts of...
Oh, you mean scientists?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they're more like archaeologists, but kind of. So discovered parts. So they discovered parts of 3 more leaves of the Codex and the bindings of other manuscripts in the library of Mount Sinai. Now, Boneshevich went on 3 occasions to the monastery in 1907, 1908, and 1911. But does not tell when or from which book these were recovered. Now, these leaves were also acquired for St. Petersburg, where they remain to this day. For many decades, the Codex was preserved in the Russian National Library. In 1933, the Soviet Union sold the Codex to the British Museum for £100,000, raised by the public subscription, which is now worth £7.6 million. Now, after coming to Britain, it was examined by Skeat and Milne using an ultraviolet lamp. In May 1975, during restoration work, the monks of St. Catherine's Monastery discovered a room beneath St. George's Chapel which contained many parchment fragments. Kurt Aland and his team from the Institute of the New Testament and Textual Research were the first scholars who were invited to analyze, examine, and photograph these new fragments of the New Testament in 1982. Among these fragments were 12 complete leaves of the Sinaiticus, 11 leaves of the Pentateuch, and 1 leaf of the Shepherd of Hermas. Now, together with these leaves, 67 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament have been found. So now, let's fast forward to June of 2005. A team of experts in the UK, Europe, Egypt, Russia, and the United States of America undertook a joint project to produce a new digital edition of the manuscript involving all 4 holding libraries. And a series of other studies was announced. This will include the use of hyperspectral imaging to photograph the manuscripts to look for hidden information which such as erased or faded text. This is to be done in cooperation with the British Library. So, there's that. Now, more than 1/4 of the manuscript was made publicly available at the Codex Sinaiticus website on July 24, 2008. And on July 6, 2009, 800 more pages of the manuscript were made available, showing over half of the entire text, although the entire text was intended to be shown by that date, so they were kind of late. Now, the complete document is now available online in digital form and available for scholarly study. Now, the online version has fully transcribed set of digital pages, including amendments to the text and 2 images of each page, with both standard lighting and raked lighting to highlight the texture of the parchment. Now, prior to September 1st, 2009, the University of Arts London PhD student Nicola Saras discovered a previously unseen fragment of the Codex in the library of St. Catherine's Monastery, and it contains the text of the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 10. So, yeah, that's all of that. So it's all now all available online. Isn't that great?
Isn't technology amazing?
Yeah. So, it's done by the British Library, the National Library of Russia, St. Catherine's Monastery, and the Leipzig University Library. So, yeah, we got all that. Let's see how the manuscript looks. Wow. It's empty. It's a blank page. Oh, I know, I found it. Okay. Let's see it. Okay, so this is the manuscript right here that we've been talking about this whole time.
Yes. It's definitely a nice place. It looks like everyone kind of words and things like that.
What?
So, telling. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, what'd you say?
Oh, see, there's no breaks, no spaces, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those who may or may not be able to even read, or if they got words wrong that weren't supposed to be split.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have words in our own English language that are like, that have the same word twice, there's no I in team, but there is me.
Yep. So this right here is the first book of Chronicles. First book of Chronicles, chapter 10, verse 11 through chapter 11 through verse 22. So, yep, that's what this is it. It's very, very cool. So, let's talk about where this book is right now. So, the Codex is now split into 4 unequal portions, which has 347 leaves in the British Library in London, 12 leaves and 14 fragments in the St. Catherine's Monastery, 43 leaves at the Leipzig University Library, which is in Germany, and fragments of 3 leaves in the Russian National Library in St. Petersburg. Now, St. Catherine's Monastery still remains the importance of a letter handwritten in 1844 with an original signature of Tischendorf confirming that he borrowed those leaves. However, recently published documents, including a deed of gift dated September 11th, 1868, and signed by Archbishop Callistratos and the monks of the monastery, indicate that the manuscript was acquired entirely illegitimately. Now, this deed... Yep.
Oh!
What? Why are you so surprised?
I know, I shouldn't be surprised that, another country acquired things from another country without permission?
But it seems that they did have permission.
No.
Looks like they did have permission, though.
Maybe not.
Okay.
2 different stories here.
So, the deed, which agrees with the report by Kurt Aland on the matter, has now been published, and this development was not widely known in the English-speaking world, as only German and Russian language media reported on it in 2009. Now, doubts as to the legality of the gift arose because when Tischendorf originally removed the manuscript from St. Catherine's Monastery in September of 1859, the monastery was without an archbishop, so that even with the intention to present the manuscript to the Tsar had been expressed, no legal gift could be made at the time. Resolution of the matter was delayed through a turbulent reign of Archbishop Cyril, which went from 1859 to 1866, to the situation only formalized after the restoration of peace. Skeet, in his article entitled The Last Chapter on the History of the Codex Sinaiticus, concluded in this way. It is not the place to pass judgment, but perhaps I may say that, as it seems to me, both the monks and Tischendorf deserve our deepest gratitude. Tischendorf for having alerted the monks to the importance of the manuscript, and the monks for having undertaken the daunting task of searching through the vast mass of material with such spectacular results, and then doing everything in their power to safeguard the manuscript against further loss. If we accept the statement of Opensky that he saw the Codex in 1845, the monks must have worked very hard to complete their search and bind up the results in so short a period. So, do you think that's good? Hello? You're muted still.
Yeah, sorry. I'm multitasking today.
Okay.
But, it's, I mean, of course, well, we Americans don't usually care about other people's history and things going on if it doesn't depend on us, so. But it's still interesting, though.
Yeah. What do you think about these monks who might have just like gathered all these documents and put it together?
I mean, it's actually kind of cool to find possibly your own ancestry or history to begin with.
Exactly. So, along with Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus is considered one of the most valuable manuscripts available, and it is one of the oldest and likely closer to the original text of the Greek New Testament. It is the only uncial manuscript with the complete text of the New Testament and the only ancient manuscript of the New Testament written in 4 columns per page, which has survived to the present day. With only 300 years separating the Codex Sinaiticus and the lifetime of Jesus, it is considered by some to be more accurate than most New Testament copies in preserving readings, where almost all manuscripts were assumed by them to be in error. Now, as for the Gospels, Sinaiticus is considered among some people the second most reliable witness to the text after Vaticanus, and the Acts of the Apostles. The text is equal to that of Vaticanus and the Epistles. Sinaiticus is assumed to be the most reliable witness of the text. Now, as for the book of Revelation, however, the text is corrupted and is considered to be of poor quality and inferior to the text of Codex Alexandrinus, and even some minuscule manuscripts in this place. So, like the minuscule 2053 and 2062. So, yeah, and that's the story. That's the end of the story of the Codex Sinaiticus, aka the Sinai Bible. So what do we think? What's our final thoughts?
My final thoughts is that I'm glad that we are able to look at what's been subscribed through the internet just as easily as looking at it in person, but knowing whether it's everything or just partial and just keep finding new pages, whether they're real or not, is interesting thing to come up with.
Gotcha. Well, there you have it, folks. That's the Sinai Bible, the very long and intricate history of how it was discovered, how it was written. Was it a hoax? Was it not? Was it written by a 19-year-old boy? Probably not. Most likely not. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. I've been Nathaniel Avila.
And I'm Hanyu.
Yes, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of wacky talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.